If you keep building your houses in other people, then it's too easy for those people to one day be able to take your home away. You have to find your home within yourself, because then that's ultimate power and that's ultimate belonging.
Welcome to episode 93 of Sharp Podcast, the personal growth podcast from SON Development, where we help you get better at the things you have to do so you can spend more time on the things you want to do. And speaking of what I want to do, or what I don't want to do, today I didn't want to record in the booth because it's really, really hot. So I thought, I'll come and record this intro in the garden. It's all right out here, it's nice. Bit of a change of scenery. I hope you like the change of audio. Of course, what that means is that you will hear lawnmowers and kids shouting and all that kind of stuff, but sorry about that, that's real life. Also, on the subject of what you want to do, you may know that SON Development, we deliver training on a wide range of subjects to help you and your business get better at what you do. What you may not know is that we also produce podcasts for clients professionally at all levels. From a full-service audio production where we do audio consultation, editing, hosting, reporting on performance, or at a simpler level, helping clients set up their podcast recording. We set up a facility at Spark Community Space where we set up all the audio equipment for them, show them how to use it, and then train the team on how to record and do the production. And for some clients, there's an even simpler requirement. They just want some help getting set up and launched into the world of podcasting. And one client like that is Naomi Lloyd. Now, I met Naomi in a chat in a coffee shop, which you're about to hear a lot more about. And we went from that chat to setting up our recording gear initially, to begin with, in an amazing place called the Elizabeth Foundation in Portsmouth. The Elizabeth Foundation is the UK's largest single provider of education services for babies and preschool children with all degrees of deafness. It's an amazing place. Karen, Becky, the whole team there, they're fantastic. And the link to the Elizabeth Foundation was that Naomi has hearing loss. And in fact, one of her children went to the Elizabeth Foundation for help with their hearing loss in their early days. So we helped Naomi set up and record the first podcast episode, which you're going to hear today. And then we continue to help her with production, editing, advice on audio, and all that kind of stuff. Naomi's a wonderful client to work with. Now, if you're on social media, you will see that there are some people out there who tell you that you can start a podcast yourself with no money, and it's easy, and it's a great way to promote your business. Now, you can do that. But if you want to promote your business in a way that shows how professional you are, I recommend getting someone who knows what they're doing to help you get going. Sadly, there are a lot of snake oil salespeople out there who do a great job of convincing you that they know what they're doing. But my view is, take advice from someone who does it professionally and who's done it for years. I started in the world of voiceovers over a decade ago now. I can't believe it was so long ago. And I know the difference between a dynamic mic and a condenser mic, so you don't have to. So I thought it'd be great to do two things: to showcase our podcast production, SON Development, but also, more importantly, to introduce you to Naomi's amazing podcast, and it's called How to Belong. So today I'm going to be resharing Naomi's launch episode with you, where I interviewed her all about the podcast, what it's about, and why Naomi is starting this quest. How to Belong is all about people's stories of learning how they try to belong, but then realise that, well, actually, life may not be about that at all. I think you're really going to love it, and I'll share in the show notes where to listen, how to subscribe, and how to find out more. And at the end, I'm going to ask you for your feedback. So stick around so you can find out how you can give us that. Now, sit back, listen to Naomi's amazing story in episode 1 of How to Belong.
Welcome to How to Belong, the podcast that delves into the human quest to find a sense of belonging in what can often feel like a lonely world. Join us as we talk to guests who've navigated their own unique paths, what we like to call their hero journeys, from feeling like they don't fit in, to the profound realisation that true belonging can only ever be found from within. Before we get started, I want to extend a huge thank you to our host for this debut episode of How to Belong, because we're actually recording from the Audiology Test Centre at the Elizabeth Foundation in Portsmouth, the UK's largest single provider of education services for babies and preschool children with all degrees of deafness. They do incredible work providing support and resources for families navigating deafness of all levels. And as someone who was born with sensorineural hearing loss myself, it feels like the perfect fit for me to kick off our journey into understanding self-acceptance, overcoming anxieties about not fitting in, and ultimately finding belonging from within. I'm Naomi Lloyd, and I'm the host of this podcast, a space where we invite guests to share their stories about their experience of not fitting in and their journey to finding true belonging within themselves. So what we thought we'd do for this first ever episode is not conform and flip it around. So the person who's going to produce this podcast, Steve O'Neill, he's going to jump on now and he's going to interview me to help you, the listener, to get an understanding of what this podcast is all about. So, hi, Steve.
Hello.
Hello. So we were introduced by our mutual friend, Jodie Goodchild, and we suggested that it'd be a good idea for us to have a chat and go for coffee. So
yes.
Can you tell me if you remember anything or much about that conversation, how it all started?
Yeah, I remember lots about that conversation. Jodie had said that you were potentially interested in a podcast, but I didn't have any information. So I rocked up and you were sat there and I started asking you a bit about kind of, who you were and what you did and all this kind of stuff and so on. And just picture this, listener, right? You're sitting in this quiet little Starbucks, drinking a coffee, chatting to someone. Suddenly, Naomi opens a bag and brings out, was it 5 books?
Yeah.
5 books, right? She puts these 5 books on the table. And I thought, what is this Jackanory? Is she going to do a reading to me or whatever? They're her books. So she's a published author. And I've never met a published author who's published that many books before, who just gets them out and just casually says, yes, I'm a published author. Right, okay, so first thing, Naomi Lloyd, published author. Then we started talking about photography, because you are primarily a wedding photographer, but you also do lots of other kinds of photography as well. Okay, so published author, wedding photographer. Then the conversation went west a bit, because we started talking about diamonds.
Yes.
And so I'm kind of, okay, hang on a second. Let me just get this right. You are a published author. You're a wedding photographer. You work in marketing as a marketing manager. You know all about diamonds. And I'm like, right, okay, what else is there? And this is where I think you and we kind of started to get on, because we both realised that we're not very good at fitting into boxes and kind of conforming to just being one kind of thing. And actually, listener, this is where the richness of this story was coming out. So, just remind us what, as a published author, for example, you've got 5 books out. How long had you been an author for, and why did you start writing?
Well, as I think with a lot of people who write, I will say it's fiction, it's sci-fi fantasy fiction with very multifaceted, very multi-genre, which is very typical of me. It all came from a dream. I've always wanted to write ever since I was a little girl, but it was around about 2015 when it was just one of those itches that I really had to scratch. I just couldn't not let it go anymore. And then this recurring dream about this alternative world that where the people were made from the energy of diamonds. I have no idea why that was coming up for me, but I knew it was going to be a dystopian, totalitarian, alternative world type story where you had a homogenous group of perfect people, and that there was going to be that heroine that would not fit in, was going to rebel, and then we were bringing time travel and all this thing about diamonds in it. And I just went with it as I started writing, and then I couldn't let it go. And that's where the diamond interest came in, because I knew there was something more than just this surface level of diamonds. Obviously, I'm surrounded by diamonds, being a wedding photographer, and this idea of perfection and sparkle and brilliance that we often find it encompasses the beginning and the story of a wedding day, and that in itself can be quite chaotic, because any pursuit of perfection is a bit chaotic, if you can imagine. And then that's it. I went on this crazy journey, not all around the world, but to many places, interviewing gemologists and jewellers, and learning about more of a philosophy side about diamonds, and confusing myself sometimes a little bit even more with the amount of things that I do.
And this is, we're just trying to get the listener to kind of feel what it was like for me, this experience. So we hear all about your history as an author and where that's come from, this dystopian, futuristic world that you've created entirely from your imagination, how you learned about diamonds. And like, you properly went off and researched, didn't you? You became a gemologist almost yourself.
I would not profess of myself as being a diamond expert, but I certainly did open more doors than I expected to do. Yeah. It just was one of those experiences that just seemed to get bigger and bigger. I went to Antwerp and Amsterdam, Cape Town, India, met some incredible people that have got some amazing stories to tell. Yeah. And it really just sort of, I started realising that there was all these sort of parallels that I could see in the journey of a diamond and actually the human experience, and to do with things like the pursuit of perfection, and that actually sometimes you need to look much, much deeper inside something to see what's really there and what makes that person so unique. Because all diamonds are unique, just in the same way as we are, as our fingerprints or a snowflake are. I mean, I won't use a whole podcast to talk about this, but I think it comes back to an element of me trying to find something within myself about belonging, and not being perfect, and embracing uniqueness a little bit more, which is what you find when you start really understanding things like diamonds.
And just bear in mind, dear listener, this is not, we haven't yet talked about a podcast. We're just having a conversation with Naomi about some of the things she's done. So we talked about your authorship. We talked about diamonds. We talked a little bit about wedding photography and light, didn't we? And the idea of capturing light, and you capturing this perfect moment for every bride and groom, because those of us who've been married and had weddings, like, it's expensive.
Very expensive.
Put a lot of money in.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
There you go. You know where I'm going with that one.
and the kind of that single image, whether it's the kind of the rings going on, or whether it's the first kiss, or it's that sort of that image up the first photo after their man and wife, or husband and husband, or wife and wife, or whatever the dynamics are. The pressure on you actually of capturing that image, because in their minds the expectation is so high, and their measure of perfection is so high, and you've got to capture all that light and present them with what you hope they're looking for. That's a bit of pressure on you, isn't it, in that moment?
Oh, absolutely. It's a hell of an adrenaline rush. And if I tell you one of my favourite wedding stories, talk about trying to create a perfect moment, was a Harry Potter themed wedding.
Wow.
And it was amazing. They'd done the whole venue so it looked like the Great Hall, and people were put in. Actually, it worked for me because it was that fantasy world that I was going into. So it was just my perfect day. But they actually had a real live owl deliver the rings. So as anybody who's ever been a photographer in a high-pressured environment, imagine you've got to capture that one moment that it's only going to do it once. The owl has got to fly across the room to deliver the ring. We got it, but yeah.
Really? Oh, my life.
So, yeah.
So, this is kind of where you and I, we started to gel really, didn't we? Because when people say to me, Steve, what do you do for a living? I find it hard to answer that question because, today we're recording a podcast. Primarily my business is about skills development and training.
Yeah.
That's my background. I do everything from workshops to digital online training, year-long management development courses, or a single workshop on communication or whatever. And the reason I'm spouting all this off, dear listener, is that I was trying to convey to Naomi, it's really hard when people say, well, what do you do? Because it's hard to encapsulate that breadth of stuff. It's hard to get that across, and this is where we've started to find common ground. This idea of, well, what do I mean? What am I about? Well, that's quite difficult to describe, and because there's so much variety.
It is, and I think that's very common for people that are creative. more perhaps than people that don't define themselves as a creative professional like you and I do. But I mean, I've heard people say to me before in a very jovial way, come on, stay in your lane. And for some reason that's really stuck with me, because I thought, well, I don't stay in my lane. And, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Or what? But it also goes back to this discussion we're having about fitting in or finding a sense of belonging. Is it curiosity? Or is it just sort of still being on a journey, which I think I am. I do follow the sort of the energy of what I'm feeling at the time. And I don't know if you agree.
I do, and I think that we'll come on to it, but the premise of this podcast is about the journey people go on to identify, how do they fit in, how do they belong, and spoiler, then two things aren't the same thing. But it was about sort of identity, and this is in the conversation in Starbucks where we got to. I keep saying Starbucks. We're not promoting Starbucks.
You are promoting Starbucks.
I am promoting Starbucks.
I'm quite like Costa, Steve. I don't know what's going on here.
Imagine a generic, small family-run coffee shop.
Yeah.
And then, so bearing in mind now, we've talked about books, diamonds, wedding, all that kind of stuff. Then you start talking about hearing, and it was only at that point that you revealed to me that you have hearing loss.
Yeah.
Which came as a genuine surprise to me. And I think when we've talked about your voice, and I think, as I said to you, I noticed there was something about your voice. There was a characteristic to your voice, but I wouldn't have at that point guessed it was to do with your hearing. I just thought it was just, we've all got different voices and the way our mouths are constructed and so on. But actually, you started to relay a number of different stories, and I think this is where this sense of how to belong and you're defining for yourself what that actually means. That's really where this started to get crystallized. So, the first thing you talked about was you were 7.
That's right.
Yeah, you told me a story about when you were 7. So tell the listener what you told me.
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you for helping me to remember that story, because I think it does. It was a bit of a light bulb moment for me, because I think the question you asked me was, can you remember a time when you really, really liked yourself or felt really confident? And it was just this moment where, when you asked me that, I went back to that moment of being 7, and on this particular day, walking to school with my grandma. I was really excited because I had something I hadn't had in my school bag before. I was desperate to show off and share with everybody in the playground, and that was the fact that I had a hearing aid. And hearing aids were, just to explain, were not something that I'd never seen, were not the new thing for me. The other people in my family wore hearing aids, but I hadn't been given one at that point, because I was a very chatty child, and there was an assumption back then that the particular genetic link wasn't going to follow on through the female line. But as it turns out, I was doing a lot of blagging it at that age and being very chatty, and it was the teachers who said, no, she's not hearing properly. So, so actually I was really excited. I think probably because I'd seen it around my family. So for me, yay, I've got one now. That's a very childlike, kind of wonderful way of feeling that I sometimes wish we could all get back to. Very innocent. You've not actually been chipped away at and shaped by all these other people in your life, which we all find out happens later on. So yeah, I really remember sort of quite precociously in the playground putting my hearing aid on and saying, hey, look what I've got. Look, you haven't got one of these. It's great, isn't it? And it didn't take long before my sense of wonder was knocked into a different place, because it's often happened in the playground at that age. We were playing a game of tag. Lo and behold, one boy sort of caught me in the tag game and brought me back to the base. And he was a very popular boy, I really remember, even at that age.
So we call him Jimmy?
We'll call him Jimmy Jim Bob. He wasn't called Jimmy Jim Bob, but let's call him that. And Jimmy Jim Bob took me back to the base and went, hey, everybody, I've caught deaf lugs. And everybody laughed. And I remember it so vividly, because it was just, it brought me down about 50 pegs or two, to say the least. And I think almost straight away I pulled my hair out of a ponytail and the hair came over my ears. And it's a shame in a way, because what a difference from that morning to the afternoon. And and we had that conversation. I went, wow, yeah, I wish I could get back to who that person was at the beginning.
And that sort of conflict between you felt that by having this, it would help you fit in because, you had something you hadn't had before and you were excited about it.
Yeah.
And suddenly what Jimmy Jim Bob did, I nearly said his name there, Jimmy Jim Bob did was he kind of rapidly ripped you away from feeling like you fit in and belong to literally the opposite, highlighting your difference and so on. And that's tricky. Kids can be horrible, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But it wasn't just there. So then you started telling me about, later on there was some sort of social gathering you'd been to as an adult.
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
Yeah, it was a social gathering, and there were quite a few people there that I didn't know, and I was on really good form at that party, I remember, and very, very excited about a project that I was working on. And this one particular person, just after having a conversation with me, after lots of champagne, made a sort of a big declaration to the room about, this girl is perfect. Look at her, she's got all these ideas and she's doing all these things and she's got this great smile. It was really over the top, but it was just like, wow, really nice. And he kept saying, she's just perfect. And that in itself is just a little bit over the top. So that's not really the point of it. But I think I had my hair back over my ears at that time. And then it just took somebody else coming along and saying, yeah, but she's not perfect. Look what she's got in her ears. And of course, once again, like the age of 7, it really shocked me because I think you build yourself up and forget about it. And then somebody says that, and it was using the word perfect and then actually saying, you're not perfect. Of course we're not perfect. But it was such a embarrassing, humiliating moment. And it made me feel really quite awful.
Yeah.
Even though I know it was, drinks were being poured and all those sort of things, but the two, and who knows, maybe that's where this later on in life it encouraged me to start again going back to the idea of perfection and writing this story of another world of perfect people, and then in my own way crashing that world because it shouldn't exist and it doesn't exist.
And it's really interesting your use of the word perfect because when you're confronted with the harsh reality that things aren't as you want them to be, so publicly, and in actually quite a humiliating way.
It was, yeah.
That's pretty crap. Sorry to interrupt your listening, but I just wanted to jump in with a quick message. If you've listened to Sharp Podcast for a few years, you might be wondering why we've been mentioning SON development and what that's all about. Are they a sponsor? Is it a house building company? Well, no. You see, we've been making Sharp Podcasts since 2017, and it's always been our aim to give you free resource that helps you get better at the things that matter to you, and we're not planning to change that. But SON Development is the training company that I founded in 2021 to help organisations, teams and individuals improve performance and make a real difference to their working lives. We run workshops, we do consultation, and we provide digital resource about leadership, coaching, sales, customer service, planning and prioritisation, and loads more stuff. So if you're a business or a team leader and you're frustrated that your training isn't making a real difference, give us a shout. You can find out more about what we do at sondevelopment.com, and of course there's a link in the show notes. But if you prefer to get your development free of charge with Sharp Podcast, would you do us a favour and just make a quick note now to share this episode, or any that you really like, with your friends, family, colleagues, anyone who you think it could help. We'd really appreciate it. End of interruption, back to the episode. I've asked you quite a lot about what you mean by perfect when you talk about diamonds and the kind of the philosophy of diamonds and perfection. What does that mean in that world?
Well, if you probably know, Steve, I know you're getting married soon, and that you look for a diamond engagement ring or a wedding ring, and when you go to a jewellery store, they will talk about the grading system for a diamond, which is called the 4 C's, which stands for the cut, the clarity, the carat, and the colour. So a diamond will be graded to try and reach a level of perfection. In reality, I think most gemologists would tell you that in their lifetime they've never come across a perfect diamond because it's kind of almost unattainable. But if you look at something like a grading system for a diamond, they will say a diamond has to have no flaws inside it for it to be perfect from the clarity scale. Let's just take clarity. That means, an average diamond is 3 billion years old. It's had one hell of a journey. 3 billion years old, yeah. So it's had an awful long journey to get to when it eventually ends on somebody's finger as a diamond ring. So for it to have gone through all those years and on that journey, all that heat and that pressure and under the surface and to get up to here, to not have absorbed other elements and other minerals with it, and therefore to be considered perfect, i.e. no inclusions, nothing inside it, that means it would be graded perfect from a clarity scale. But I was talking to a gemologist who fascinated me, who said when she looked for her, even though she worked for a top jewellery store, she would put that grading system aside because she's looking more for a unique diamond. Right. Because that's going to reflect her love story a lot more than a diamond that is empty and doesn't have anything in it. So, if you can find a diamond that's got something really interesting inside it, then to me, she said, that would be very representative of her love story, because who wants to find somebody who's empty? When you meet somebody, a lot of the journey of falling in love with somebody is about learning about them and what their story is and all those memories. And a human memory to me are a bit like the elements that diamonds absorb along the way. It's similar. It's part of your story. And but yeah, we have completely gone along with this idea of a diamond is forever and perfection, flawlessness. But yes, you mentioned I work in marketing. That is an incredibly brilliant marketing slogan. In fact, the whole diamond is forever. That came from the most successful marketing campaign that has ever been, and I don't think anybody's ever beaten it. And in 1947, Francis Geraghty, I believe, was the marketing executive at De Beers. They needed a really impactful slogan. 1947, at the end of the Second World War, we needed solidarity. We needed people to believe in a future. So the Diamond Forever story is fantastic. And it's a great story because isn't that what we hope for and dream of in a relationship? I think it should be more about embracing uniqueness than embracing perfection. And I think where we are now in a world that is so chaotic with the pressure of perfection, it'd be really great if we could just sort of change that narrative a little bit. I'm not trying to change the whole diamond industry, but just for me personally, when I think about things like this, I think we should be talking about uniqueness a lot more than perfection. So I've just pulled out a little passage from a poem that I chose to be read out by a friend of mine on my own wedding day. And I'll just read it to you now. It's very much what I'm talking about. It says, I love you for putting your hand into my heaped up heart and passing over all the foolish, weak things you can't help dimly seeing there, and for drawing out into the light all the beautiful belongings that no one else had looked hard enough to find. And to me, it really spoke to me all those years ago when I got married, and I still feel that way now. When I feel I belong the most is when I feel seen by my partner or the people that I'm close to, and that's what I keep coming back to with this sort of thing. It's when you look beyond the surface. So it doesn't matter whether you're wearing a hearing aid or whether you're wearing glasses, or even if your hair looks particularly shiny that day, or whether you managed to clean that diamond so it sparkles as much as it possibly can. It's about taking it just a bit further and standing back from that societal pressure or perfection. And that's when I feel like I belong, and people can see beyond that.
That feels like that's what this podcast is about. So,
yeah.
For those of you who are listening and thinking like, well, hang on a second, I'm not rolling in diamonds, I'm not married, those things aren't things that are part of my world. We all understand what those things are about. And I guess what you're saying, if I think I've got this right, is that whatever measure you're setting up as perfection, what you want to be good, you're never going to get there because perfection is impossible. And striving for perfection, whether it's the perfect diamond, whether it's the perfect husband, wife, whatever, whether it's the perfect wedding dress, whether it's the perfect book, the perfect photo, everything is a degree of compromise. It's the things about it that actually make it interesting, that make it not perfect, that actually make it more attractive.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you've probably heard this been said before, but Dr. Brené Brown always says that fitting in is actually the opposite of belonging. As soon as you try to fit in, you betray yourself. Yeah. And maybe that's why I jump lanes, and maybe that's why you jump lanes. I don't know. It's like that saying, "Why fit in when you were born to stand out?" Yeah. But it's having that confidence to feel like you can belong to yourself, and I think that's ultimately the hero journey that we talk about when we write books. And then you and I have spoken about this, that often you start with the premise of a heroine or a hero who's a bit of a rebel and doesn't conform to whatever the society is in this particular story, and they have to go on a journey, and ultimately the journey is coming back to themselves. Probably as I was when I was 7, before but Jimmy Jim Bob ruined it. No, can't blame Jimmy Jim Bob.
So we talked about the past, and we've talked about Jimmy Jim Bob and some of that kind of stuff and so on. And then to kind of bring us from the past into the present, I remember you telling me a story about, in relation to you fitting in and to do with grief and that stuff. Yeah,
that's right. I lost my mum, coming up to nearly 3 years this summer. And I think been very vulnerable here. It absolutely knocked me off my axis. It was obviously devastating, but incredibly ungrounding. You've experienced losing a parent as well, haven't you, Steve? And it really does sort of shift the tectonic plates of the world, of your own world. And I certainly struggled a lot with it, and kind of disappeared for a while into sort of a dark cave of grief. And it really changed some fundamental relationships that I have with people around me. Luckily not my really strong ones, such as my husband and my children, but some other relationships. And it knocked me off my axis, and it also really left me with this real sense of loneliness, which I know is really common when you go through grief. Grief is a very lonely experience, but it's something that can continue with you for a long time and really shake you up. And it definitely, that sense of not knowing where I belong anymore, particularly having lost the person that was so formative for me, that origin relationship, and then to lose some other relationships that I felt very seen in before this happened, and then suddenly felt very unseen in. It really, really made me think, where do I belong? And I kept going to YouTube channels and to podcasts to try and help me to understand grief and why it's so lonely and why it can upset relationships. And it helped to know that there were other people out there going through really similar experiences. And that's why I felt so motivated to just give this a go and see if there's other people that have experienced similar things. Because this is a theme, when I was speaking to you, I kept coming back to, was this sense of belonging and this journey to belonging. And yes, grief was definitely the catalyst for that. Yeah. And I'm sure there are other people that have had similar experiences.
What was it about the podcast? Because I remember you talking about some of the podcasts you listened to, compared, instead of watching YouTube or reading books. What is it about podcasts in particular you think that's powerful?
Well, I mean, I've always loved reading, hence why I went into writing. But when I went through losing my mum, I just for months and months and months just really couldn't read. My brain just wasn't able to sit and focus. I needed to walk. And what's brilliant about being able to listen to a podcast is that it feels like you're listening to a conversation with friends or with people that you've relate to. And I love walking with my dog on the beach. And so this was, it was life-saving. There was some of the grief podcasts that I listened to really helped me a lot. And I can really see how it makes a difference to people. Because you need to move when you're going through something like this. Not everybody does, but I certainly did. I needed to move, and I needed to physically move. So, I mean, I can't put earphones into my ears because that's where my hearing aids are, right. But I can wear Bluetooth headphones over my ears, and so it's very comfortable for me to do that. And so I could be cleaning the house, getting some activity, but also trying to settle my thoughts and anxiety and understand what was going on, with all these feelings of loneliness and anxiety after grief. So I think they're a really, really powerful tool and a brilliant way of connecting with people. Yeah, definitely.
I think there's a couple of things unique about podcasts, which is why I really love them. I've been doing mine since 2017. And I think, first of all, there's something intimate about them. You're just, my voice, listener, is in your ear. There's something
scary.
It's scary, and you have to respect that. And there's a level of consideration you have to pay people. This is why I get all excited about good audio gear and quality and so on, because you're close into someone whereas if you're watching a video, the audio is part of it, but then there's all this sort of presentation to camera and lighting and all that kind of stuff and so on. And from an observer's perspective, all of those things are taking up some of your attention. Whereas with audio, it's just that voice, it's just that conversation. And we're having a chat because we're friends and we're talking to each other. And hopefully that's the sense the listener is getting. And I do think podcasts are unique in that aspect, particularly the audio-only versions. And I can understand how helpful they will have been when you were going through your grief and that kind of stuff, and why you want to give something back. Hence, the How to Belong podcast. How to Belong, absolutely. So tell us very quickly, and then what do you want it to be like? What's it about? Where's it going? Well, I love to connect with people, to examine the sort of conversation we're having today, going from that journey of not always feeling like the fit in to and just exchanging stories, because that storytelling is so powerful. And if people are happy to come and chat with me about their own hero journey, and I use that in that story arc, like I said before, of feeling like a bit jumping lane or in your own rebel area to finding your own sense of belonging within. And by that I mean it's about belonging to yourself. Somebody told me that when I was having a tricky time and feeling very on my own, and I thought it was really powerful, that if you keep building your houses in other people, then it's too easy for those people to one day be able to take your home away. You have to find your home within yourself, because then that's ultimate power and that's ultimate belonging. Building your houses in other people. What do you mean by that? Well, if you put all your belonging into the other person accepting you and always wanting you to be part of their life, then you've built a kind of a home within them, rather than taking the ownership for yourself. You just made me think of something there, which I haven't said before. Actually, what's common here is the risk, the danger, is when you're handing the power over to other people to define what you're about. Yeah. So in a way, when you were 7, you handed the power over to Jimmy Jim Bob, who was able to bring it all crashing down. At the social gathering, someone else, had the power to bring it crashing down. So I guess it's this idea of not handing that power over to other people, but keeping that power for yourself and working out for yourself what matters. Absolutely. I mean, if of course, people will always say things. People, even if they don't mean to do, but if you belong firmly inside of yourself and know who you are, it's a lot easier to listen to that, nod and then walk away and not absorb it. Okay. Whereas my natural disposition has always been to absolutely absorb it and let it shape me, let it colour me, and that's not
it's not a very easy way to live life.
Yeah.
And I think that's where my future going forward is hopefully going to be a bit of a better one.
Okay.
And talking about, having hearing loss and being upfront about it and metaphorically or literally putting the hair behind my ears, but also being very confident that, I am somebody who doesn't always stay in my lane because I'm a creative person and I'm curious, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
And it's great for the other person if they're very firm in their lane, brilliant. And that's everybody's unique and everybody has to be where they feel that they belong. But ultimately that has to be within yourself, not relying on other people to tell you whether you belong or not.
Yeah, love it. So listen, I'm coming to the end of my temporary hosting of this podcast. I'm going to hand back over to you because you're the host.
Are you sure you want to hand it over? You're doing amazing.
No, I do want to hand it over. But before I do, is there anything we haven't talked about that we want to talk about? Anything that I needed to ask you I didn't ask you? No. I think really I just want to say to the listeners, if any part of today's discussion resonated with you, you find yourself nodding along or recalling your own experiences of not feeling like you belong anywhere, we'd love to hear from you. Have you got a story about your journey to belonging, whether it's overcoming adversity, finding your place in a new environment, embracing your unique identity? Love to invite you to join us on the How to Belong podcast. So to find out how to get in touch or share your story, you can find me on my website, which is naomilloyd.com, or check out the show notes for more information on how to connect. And finally, I'd love to end this first episode by just saying a huge thank you for listening, if you've got this far. Steve alluded to this, but I've always disliked the sound of my own voice. Always believed that I sound a bit foggy or not quite clear because of my hearing loss. But I've made the leap to recording this podcast as part of my own journey to belonging. And I really hope that you'll join me along the way. So before I go, I'd just like to share a quote on belonging that I read to myself every day. And you may have heard it before. It's written by Maya Angelou. You only are free when you realise you belong no place. You belong every place, no place at all. The price is high, the reward is great. So what did you think? What an amazing story. If you want to find out more about Naomi, her books, her photography, or where the podcast is, you can head over to naomilloyd.com. I'll put that link in the show notes and all the other links for Naomi as well. I want to hear what you think. What did you think about that podcast episode? Did you like it? What did you like most? What was it about Naomi's story that resonated with you? And do you like hearing that kind of stuff? As I said, all the links will be in the show notes. And obviously, if you want to talk to me about professional production of your podcast, you can contact me on LinkedIn, or again, I'll put all my links in the show notes. Anyway, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's starting to get noisy out here, so I'm going to sign off. Thank you ever so much for listening, as always. And remember, as I always say, don't try to be better than anyone else. Just try each day to be a little bit better than the person you were yesterday. See you later.